Welcome to Skechcraft, the podcast for art, design, and process junkies. I'm Rob Duenas, art director for Game Fan Magazine and Artist Esquire. This is an unedited podcast, which means that there is some cursing from time to time, so please be aware. Thanks for listening, and here we go. Okay. Rob Duenas here, art director for Game Fan Magazine and Artist Esquire. So, Sketch Rants, episode 12. Graphic Design 101. I don't know if that's an accurate title, but let's talk about some graphic design. So, I've gotten some feedback here and there at cons, email, online, Facebook, bar, and sketch jams about Game Fan and how I go about doing some of that stuff. If you're unfamiliar, I am the art director for a magazine that publishes whenever, and and I do some crazy layouts. If you haven't seen it, you can go to GameFanMag.com, see a lot of that stuff. You can go to my DeviantArt page, see some of that. You can go to the Game Fan Mag Facebook page, and I got some examples in there. The one that seems to come back to me a lot, and I got two specific. I got an email and I got a internet post made back in April. About a guy who found it that I recently discovered on accident. I swear to God, I don't Google myself. Concerns the Donkey Kong Country map that I made in Game Fan issue 5. So if you aren't aware with Game Fan issue 5, we ran a little Big Planet cover for a preview. Initially it was supposed to be a Donkey Kong cover. Donkey Kong Country Returns had come out, and I wanted to do a Donkey Kong cover because that was the first issue of Game Fan that I ever bought was Donkey Kong Country. And I wanted to come full circle and do that. And because the magazine shipped late like we always do, Dave decided to put a more timely game on there. And I to this day, I don't agree with it. And I didn't agree with it because I didn't have time to draw it. And we had to run the CG rendered little Big Planet cover that I had to do a ton of work to do just to make it look good. And I hated it. So to make a long story short, I took the Game Fan layout for Donkey Kong Country Returns pretty fucking serious. What I wanted to do was create a complete ode to Donkey Kong Country. So first I managed to get all this concept art from the game that one of the artists put up and has since taken down for Donkey Kong Country Returns, and I made this big sort of sticker book-like collage. And filled with concept art, I took all the renders and I made them look like grunged up stickers and stuff. And then what I did is Dave gave me a timeline for Donkey Kong Country. And usually in Play and in previous magazines that he's done, and pretty much everybody does, and matter of fact, we even did once in Game Fan issue 3 for the Yuji Naka Hero Worship interview, is a timeline's it's like 5 things. It's like 1996, Donkey Kong Country return, or Donkey Kong Country shows up, and it is, sold so many millions of copies. And then 1998 or 97, so forth and so forth. And it's usually a little box in the corner. I hate that shit. All right? So I decided to take it upon myself to create a map. And I figured a map because, it's Donkey Kong Country, maps, treasure. And I wanted to, in some family circus-like fashion, walk you around the map. Like, remember that little kid in the family circus who'd walk around and you see the little dotted lines, right? And I wanted to walk you around the map on this timeline. And then I would take all these game screens I'll go get, and I had to go and capture every game screen, and I'll find all this stuff for Donkey Kong Country. None of the assets in that map were handed to me. I had to go and find everything either on the internet or take photographs of or create. It's my Game Boy, all sorts of stuff in there. And I created this sort of history of Donkey Kong in 2 pages. And I was pretty proud of, and Dave was like, holy shit. And he was like, Nintendo should be paying us for this sort of fucking thing, And it's true, they should. They should be paying for that. I mean, it's good marketing. They could print that stuff up and let me do the artwork on the back and make a big fucking poster, just like old Nintendo Power. Remember they used to do posters in Nintendo Power? You used to have a fold-out poster, have artwork on the back. There'd be something like my Ninja Gaiden 2 poster. So I got an email from James Shiflin a while back congratulating me on that layout. And then he sent me a new one recently asking me about Let's see here, asking me about my Photoshop. So he says, if I get you a question, you do both original art and the layouts for the magazine. I'm assuming most of the layout work is done with programs such as Photoshop. Correct. And I know Photoshop-esque programs are used in various ways to enhance drawn artwork. Correct. So my question would be, are those two separate disciplines, or is there a lot of overlap? Did say the skills you learned with the Photoshop enhanced art transfer easily to doing layout work or vice versa. So it's a little confusing. I asked him then to specify what layouts he was talking about, and he went on to further say, my favorite layout thus far has been the Donkey Kong Country Returns review and timeline for GameFan 5. The kinda sticker book collage / cluttered desk design infuses the article with a really effective and fitting sense of nostalgia. So that sort of tails into another thing where there's a blog called How Do You Kill a Tornado, and back in April he found the same thing, and his quotes on the Donkey Kong timeline looks to be the only instance of them posting pages. Okay, hold on. This is a layout that goes beyond presentation to become an individual work of art. I'm quoting, by the way. Not just information on the DKC series, but a wonderful supplement worth owning, irrespective of the game itself. It's saying something in its own right about the series, a commentary about its nostalgia and scope and the enthusiasm of its fans. It just oozes passion. It's mostly official Nintendo art and pictures of its consoles, boxes, cards, and so on, but the way the artist used them to say what he or she wanted to say instead of what Nintendo intended those assets to say. This is what DKC is. This is the series to me. This is absolutely how it should be. I've seen pretty layouts before, but layouts that themselves say something, nothing struck me quite like this. So, first off, none of that shit came from Nintendo, and they could fucking care less. So, while they provided me with a bunch of little mini screens from the games, the original games, that were taken from a QuickTime video, they weren't even real pixels, so they all scan lines when you blow them up and shit. Nintendo doesn't fucking care about their history with games, from a PR standpoint, in my opinion. I think the company is fantastic. The people that I've met in Nintendo are fucking fantastic. Especially last E3, it was the one time I got treated like game fan. Like, oh my god, you should be in line. They brought me in. I think they're wonderful. All PR is horrible, and they don't fucking care about the history of Nintendo. So, let me get into this. Infusing art, graphic design, layout. So there are some former Play employees and graphic designers out there who hate what I do. If you're one of those people, turn this shit off or fucking continue to hate. Haters gonna hate. I don't believe graphic design should be drag and dropping. I learned graphic design on the fly in t-shirts. I wanted a job drawing. I wasn't good enough to get a job illustrating, but I found t-shirt work, which sort of, I had enough artistic skills to do it, but I was also pretty good at moving some stuff around. Generally, graphic design is this, and illustration is something else. Let me explain. Graphic design, in my opinion, is where I'm like a DJ, right? I'm taking elements. Okay, it could be a logo that's handed to me, it could be assets, screens, right? Or I'm acquiring them. I'm going out and getting things that are already pre-made, okay? Kind of like when you go to the grocery market and you're a chef, right? And you're picking oranges and you're picking walnuts and you're picking red wine and you're taking these elements, right? And you're fusing them together, okay, to create something new and fresh and hot. Illustration, as a designer, is where I'm taking ideas, words, right? Something that may exist or may not exist, and from a blank paper, I'm creating everything. I'm pouring out all the lines, maybe the colors too, okay, and I'm creating a spot illustration. What I try to do with GameFan is merge the two, because GameFan back in the day was a very visual magazine. Dave and them used to paint with borders and stuff like that, and I always felt that when you went into a game review in GameFan, you felt like you were in the game. It was a little easier for them to do back in the day because they had fucking everyone was doing their own layouts. Shit also got kind of crazy, but I do believe in that the most. I also think that you have to tell a story with your pictures without words. In t-shirts, when you go to a Walmart and a Kohl's and a Target, you walk into the store. There's no advertisement saying we have t-shirts here. You just go in the t-shirt section, you look up, and something appeals to you, and it doesn't. And I've always wondered, what is that? What drags a person in? And they're not all the same. So it's about like the property. How can I create an iconic image? How can I get something to be iconic, right? Or has an attitude, it has something to say, without saying something. It's a very Zen-like thing, but I've really focused on it with my art. A lot of people, I remember in the last podcast I talked about, conventions, and one artist had asked me, he's like, hey, it's like people come to the convention and they just walk right to the table and they hand you money. It's like they're there to see you. And I'm like, no one knows who I am, dude. But I do sort of design my art the way I would t-shirts. I have the same mentality, whether I try to design it in a way that you're going to see the image from across the room. It's going to stand out amongst other things. It's very hard to describe it. It's more of a mindset when I'm creating rather than a specific list. If you do this, 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 and that, it will work. Collectible images. I try to make everything I design collectible. Everything I create collectible. What does that mean? Well, just because you put collectible on that shit, don't mean it's collectible. Like the recent Star Wars DVDs and Blu-rays and shit are like pieces of shit in my opinion. They feel cheap. They're flimsy. The artwork is piss poor. They don't even have this Drew Struzan stuff anymore. And then when I open up the Lord of the Rings DVDs, they feel there's weight to them. They have artwork and maps and hand-drawn stuff and little extras and animatics, and they're just brimmed and packed to the, like every space on that DVD, and the quality of the materials feel like they're heavier than the books, And to me, that feels collectible. It feels like something I should own, not something maybe I should buy, but like I should. Why don't I own that? I mean, that's as a geek, as a fan of pop culture, I should own that. I try to make my images collectible. When I go into a spread, especially the Donkey Kong one, I wanted this. I'm like, this should be a map I could put on my wall. And I could just look back and I could keep looking at it for days and days and days and days and probably see something. And then you have to know your audience and your subject. And it doesn't mean so much like you're designing for a demographic, like, oh, my audience is going to be like 14-year-old, comic artists and stuff. It's not really it. What I'm trying to get to is what kinds of people overall, right, really like Star Wars? What do they look for? What about what story does this property tell? And it could be about spam. I've had to do that shit with spam. It could be about Star Wars. It could be about Donkey Kong. It could be about whatever. But I try to really get into that subject and what is the core essential part of that subject. If you go look at the t-shirts, like for like Invader Zim at Hot Topic, and you see all like the taco comments and stuff. Now, you could say that came from 4chan, but I guarantee you those people understand the cartoon, because I can hand that same fucking license to another company and watch them just put Gur on a shirt and throw a bunch of splatters or fucking neon holographic, fluorescent paints on there, and nothing would sell. When you understand what makes the property appealing overall, in a broad sense, especially what about it appealed to you first? And if you have no interest in it whatsoever, well, what does it speak to? And then you need to turn on a part of your brain. You need to like activate this part of your brain where you become a fan of it. I do it a lot in the magazine. I'm like, I don't fucking care for Need for Speed. And I read the review, I start to look at the assets or watch the videos, and maybe I don't even have time to play that. I generally never get to play any of these games while I'm making the magazine. But I sort of pretend and become a fan of each one as I work on it. At least the ones that I put a lot of work into, the ones that just sort of get in there, you drop them in your templates and stuff. But that's what I like to do most, and I think that how where that line blends between your illustration and art is when you create art, you sort of own it, like you're like, oh, if I'm going to draw Superman, I want that Superman. You're either doing one of two things, in my opinion. You're either trying to draw Superman, or you're creating an iconic image that invokes Superman, features Superman, for the lack of a better description. And I sort of feel that merging that into graphic design, whether you can draw or not, is the most important thing, and if it's Donkey Kong or say it's, Transformers, I mean, I want to take the toys, I want to take the best statues, not all of them, but the best of the best. I want statues, I want to throw that in there. I want to feel what it was like to go to my friend's house, and they would almost like own shrines to games. Like, I had a friend who's in a wheelchair, and so he couldn't do a lot, but he had a Super Nintendo, and I didn't have one, and he had Zelda, and he had this shrine to Zelda, and just like, it was just amazing to me. I had another friend who had like all the Final Fantasy action figures, and he would arrange them. And you could say, oh, that's kind of weird, or well, I never thought that. I mean, these were people that it was like walking into a toy store, but it was really organized and well put together. And I'm a big fan of that, even though I don't really collect things. I don't have toys all over my room and stuff. I just have art all over the floor, because that's what I do. But I'm a big fan of that. Dave Halverson's a big collector. I mean, we've shown some of his collection off in the magazine, and I sort of feel that compulsiveness, that like, all the little elements. Like, okay, here's the videotape when they from Donkey Kong, and when they, you know, used to do those Nintendo Power like videotapings before they had YouTube. They'd send you a videotape and you'd put it in and watch like a 5-minute, 10-minute promo for a game. I mean, like the Star Fox 64 one's probably the most ridiculous ever. These are all on YouTube now, but they used to send you these videotapes. And people photograph this shit. You can go on a Flickr, you can find these things all over if you don't have them yourself. And I do. And I cut them out and I apply whatever filters I have to make them work, a little bit of noise, and I drop them in there, and I decorate the borders with Super Nintendo controllers. If I don't have the actual books, I'll photograph a book, you know, in a nice 10-megapixel camera, little one I bought from Walmart a couple years back. Put that in there, and then I'll drop, you know, images in there and make it look like a book. You know, I just feel that that's what, if you're going to go out and buy a magazine, that's what should be in there. That, to me, is the difference between the internet and a digital magazine and collectible print. I mean, Game Fan should be called Game Shrine, in my fucking opinion. It shouldn't be a game magazine that has reviews and previews. It should be like everything that's in there is in there because it's pretty fucking awesome. I don't really give a shit. Maybe we'll have a section for games we hate at some point. You know, we can do like player haters. Like, here's a shitty game, fine. But I just think that, you know, that when you get a series like Ninja Gaiden, that I should be able to go in there and create the most badass, be all end all. Like, that's it. Like, it's that is the tome of Ninja Gaiden. And you could print that shit up on your fucking wall and be like, God damn, that's awesome. And a piece of artwork to go with it too. So the sticker book collage and all that other stuff kind of comes from my fascination as a kid with sticker books. And they used to do these big, like, Ghostbusters and Transformers when the Scholastic people would come to school, and they'd always have these collectible sticker books and stuff, and Nintendo would have them, and like they put stickers and collectible stickers in the Smash Brothers games. I've always been a big fan of that. And as a kid, it was hard because, you know, most guys would call you gay or some shit like that, you know, or more derogatory term than that. If you were into that sort of thing, and I wasn't, but I just sort of always liked that stuff. I like coloring books, and I liked sticker books, and I liked strategy guides, the Nintendo Power ones back in the day, and the Versus Book strategy guides that came out, and the Game Fan strategy guides that came out. They always felt like fans of the game, people that knew the games inside and out, were making that. And anytime I get the opportunity to recreate that feeling, you know, to that mindset, maybe I don't know how to play Donkey Kong better than everyone, but I really love the series, and I want to do more of it. And Game Fan Issue 7, I'm doing something like that with this guy and a few other things, and the more, you know, I'm able to do that, the more successful we'll be. And I just think that as a graphic designer, that, you know, if you don't get to do that at work because work sucks and you just got to drag fucking text boxes and whatever, sit down and create some real shit. Be like, hey, you know, I'm going to do a movie poster, and I'm going to take these elements, and, you know, I'm going to actually print them out, trace over them, do some watercolor, and I'm going to scan that back in and apply it in and do some airbrush. I mean, you have to mix your hand. Always keep your hand on quotation marks, your artistic ability. If you can't draw or paint, you can print something out and add some watercolor over it. You know, it ain't that freaking hard. Scan it back in. Plenty of people I've met in t-shirts aren't illustrators, create really great graphic design. I don't think you have to be a great illustrator to be a graphic designer. I think what you have to do is know how to invoke an emotion. That's the most important thing, in my opinion, in commercial art, is invoking an emotion. If you want perfection and the world's best drawn art, I don't know how to do that. Good luck. I'm not the world's best artist, and I don't claim to be. But I know how to invoke an emotion. Paint with words. Paint with pictures, you know. Paint those layouts. Don't design them. If you come up with the design, good fucking luck. But if you're painting them, that artistic edge, and if you're not good at it, get good at it. If you don't know how, then find another job. I mean, it's hard. It's hard for me, and look at the stuff I make. It's hard. It's not easy for me. But these are my thoughts, and these are where I sort of stand on it. And I'm really glad that sort of feedback came in, and I was able to sort of lay it down in the podcast for you. If y'all have any questions, y'all want me to sort of extrapolate on something, if I'm unclear or I ran amok, you let me know. I'll reply. All right, with that, I'm going to go on the next podcast. Okay, bye.